Ciao everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Superhuman Podcast. I am your host, Renato Capasso, and together we will talk about the latest biohacks and scientific discoveries that will turn you from a human into a superhuman. And it all starts now. Hey there, my dear biker friend, and today's episode is all about sleep. I'm going to interview Mollie, and she's one of the top podcasters when it comes to sleep. And I'm so excited to have her on the show because we're going to talk about so many sleep-related things. And this is such an important topic because it affects a number of things like hormones, recovery, cognitive function, and more. We're going to talk about the sleep timing, why it's important to go to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time. But also we're going to talk about all the crazy devices that are out there that can help you with sleep and tracking your sleep, like Oura Ring, Whoop Band, Biostrap, Fitbit, and so on. We're going to talk about heart rate variability, how these can affect your stress level, recovery, and sleep. And of course, there's going to be a big focus about REM sleep, how to increase REM sleep, and all about the creation of a great sleep environment, hacks for creating a great sleep environment, body temperature, room temperature. We're going to talk, of course, about melatonin and sleep, but also why you need to be careful with melatonin and other sleep things like hypnosis and its effects on sleep, vitamin D, magnesium, L-theanine, ashwagandha, also supplements that can support sleep. And we're going to finish with Mollie's sleeping routine, which is like very long, but also very resourceful. So please stay tuned and enjoy this episode. I also want to say that all the resources that are shared in this episode will be linked in the show notes with the link that can be found also on my Instagram bio that has a lot of discounts for all those products. So check the show notes because there are a lot of great deals for you. But for now, sit down and enjoy this great episode about sleep with Mollie. So excited to have you here because, I always say to any podcast guest is I only invite people who I just follow them and follow their work and admire them. And I do podcasting in a very selfish way. I just want to know more about a topic from what I think is the best about a person to speak about the topic, and I'll try to get them in. So welcome to the Superhuman Podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. I want to do a great introduction to you, but I know I'm going to fail at pronouncing your surname. So in fact, you saw from the stories, I say, hey, I'm going to record an episode with Mollie.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that kind introduction about, because as a podcast host too, it's such a cool experience because you get to just speak with people that you're interested in and the topics that you're interested in and what have you. So completely hear that. And I'm happy to be filling that role for today. That's awesome. And it's McGlocklin, and I totally hear you. I am I get very challenged on how to pronounce different names that are coming my way, so I totally hear that.
Yeah, even though you said it, I don't know how I'm going to record this intro because I always record the intros after anyway, I'm going to struggle, so forgive me if I pronounce the name wrongly, your surname wrongly. But yeah, welcome to the show. And I've been following you for a few months. I got to know you through Kyla, and then as soon as I landed to your Instagram profile, I've been discovering more, and I went to your website. Great website, by the way. I love how you structure. I do podcasting, background in science, but I also work in marketing. So I kind of unite the two things. So great job there. And your main focus is sleep. And but for those people who are listening and don't know you, would you like to tell them a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. And that's amazing to hear about the website. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. So a little bit about my background, because it certainly does pertain to everything that I do with sleep as a skill, because basically what can probably aid in this story is that the creation of sleep as a skill really started to solve my own problem in my sleep. And what that story kind of looked like was, as I was an entrepreneur in the middle of Manhattan for many, many years, burning the candle at both ends. I was for a long time having a lot of labels about my sleep. I'm a night owl, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a bad sleeper, it's in my genes, all these sort of things. And it really lived for me like it was fixed, and it was just sort of how it was. And that was just like me in through and through, nothing else to really do about that. And it wasn't until I went through my own period of insomnia while traveling internationally that, the whole I was newly acquainted with the fact that I just can't sleep. Like, this is maddening. And it was a really scary time for me. It was like a rock bottom in my life of just, because often too, when we're dealing with sleep issues, they don't just come out of nowhere. It's not like coming from a vacuum. There's a lot of things that you're managing of your life and your stressors and your health that are just stacking up. And then for me, the symptomology was at that point was not being able to sleep consistently, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, and just, night after night. So it wasn't until really going at my ultimate rock bottom moment when I went to the doctors in Croatia and left with their version of Ambien, and it was like, okay, I got to do something, because what am I going to be taking these things like for the rest of my life? What is the game plan here? So what ensued was really going down the rabbit hole to better understand one, how to not only restore my sleep, but two, once going down that route, then starting to discover this whole world of chronobiology, circadian rhythm optimization, and these things that you can do to transform not only your sleep, but really your life in general. So once I started not only restoring homeostasis to my sleep, a level of homeostasis, but also reaching, a element of my sleep of optimization that I never thought possible, I just kept started working with people organically. And then from that place is built what we have, happening today. We have an online course. We put people through one-on-one and launching a cohort this summer. We have weekly newsletters, weekly podcasts, and this whole world's really got created out of solving really just my own struggles in sleep.
Yeah, and that's great. And that's why, there are a lot of sleep experts out there. But to be honest, personally, that's why I've chosen you. I love when people start from a struggle in a specific area, and that is the main motivation, to learn about the area and to eventually become an expert about the area, because they can really understand how it feels like. And talking about sleep, I guess I was very excited for it because it interests me personally. I think I'm doing quite well with sleep, but I was very interested in recording an episode like that with you, because talking about pandemic, I think sleep deprivation is a pandemic, is an epidemic. And, so many people are suffering from this. And I'm sure so many people that are listening will take a lot of value from it. So I have a lot of questions from you. And then obviously, also at the end, we're going to share all your resources, and also in the show notes, we're going to attach all the links on how people can find more about what you do. But for now, I'm just going to start with a very simple question. And the reason why I've asked it is because it's one of those things that it seems obvious, but they're not that obvious anymore. Like, why sleep is important. Everyone knows that it's important, but why is actually it's important?
Yeah, great question. Because it might be like this kind of common sense thing that we might think of, yeah, I know I should sleep more, and yeah, it's important, but it's often clearly not landing for many of us the importance of it if there's something missing in the understanding of it for some people, and then for other people it's a hypervigilance on it, and that's a whole other category. But as far as the why of its importance, okay, so we really struggle to find areas that are not negatively impacted when we are deprived of sleep for even an acute period of time or a chronic period of time. So what I mean by that is there's certain studies looking at shifts of glucose levels after even just a couple nights of sleep deprivation. So glucose going up, having you be more hungry, and then seeking out probably the foods that you might not be most served by. One example. Another example, then looking at immune function, immune health. So one of those things where we travel long distances, long haul travel, and then being more and more apt to get sick. There's other variables there, but often sleep deprivation can play a real role. Heart health. Looking at, you can often see if you're sleep deprived, some of the functionality of your heart can be certainly elements of stress and mood dysregulation coming up. So you might tend to be more anxious if you're sleep deprived. It just, some of those the ability to stabilize those moods getting kind of thrown off. And in alignment with that, you can see things like your heart rate go up, blood pressure shift, hormonal function, as just alluding to, can really get thrown off, and that equilibrium of our rhythms then can often go awry, and you're having sort of hormonal imbalances at the wrong time of day or altogether. Then in alignment with that, just cognitive function can go down. I work with a lot of poker players, and so for them, they're very clear, well, some of them, certainly the ones I'm working with, are very clear that sleep can be paramount for their ability to make strong decisions at the table that can yield them, large sum of money or not. So, the list kind of just goes on and on. There's more and more things that you can look to, but we really do seem to struggle to find, an area that's not impacted. And then on a more immediacy side of things, just, everyday accidents, whether it's, just injuries or what have you, or certainly car accidents, motor equipment, functioning of the equipment accidents, a number of things from being sleep deprived, micro sleeping on, the job or on the road or in the sky. I mean, virtual, like lots and lots of elements that are really, really clear when we start peeling back the onion.
Yeah, I mean, that I think will convince anyone to really work on their sleep, right? Like, there are so many things, and I'm sure you have summarized it all, because there is also, so much more biological components that are involved when you lack of sleep. And correct me.
Huge, yeah. This is just touch. I mean, we could really fill the whole podcast with just that, truthfully, of, some of the systemic impacts of the, it's a big deal. So great question.
Yeah, that's great. And correct me if I'm wrong with this, and because I want to make one thing clear. First, for myself, I think I know the answer, but also for majority of people who are listening, who thinks that you can make up for a bad night's sleep. Like, let's say, okay, I slept 4 hours today. Tomorrow I'm going to try to sleep 8. So I got the difference of hours, and it's going to be fine. Does it, I know the answer, but correct me if I'm wrong. Does it work like that?
Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that. And I know it's so challenging. And I think I always get a little concerned about the term sleep debt, because I think many of us might think, oh, well, what else do you do with the debt? You got to pay it off. And if you're accruing all this sleep debt, then I'm going to make the investment or whatever this weekend or whenever. But unfortunately, to your point, it doesn't quite work like that. And often what results is when we do have those augmented periods of sleep with the aim of making up for that missed sleep, some of the quality of that sleep can be in question if this is a pattern that's done time and time again. So there is a distinction between an hour or so more versus what many people do, which is, multiple hours augmented on the weekends. And that can really, really mess with things. And also, I think that it's really important for people to know that there's a number of studies that look at consistency of sleep duration, but of the time of bed and time of wake to seem to be more important in a number of studies as compared to just like 9 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, like that up and down.
Yeah.
And I think what can be empowering about that is that's an element that we can arguably control versus, there might be things come up or whatever, but we can often, if we are focused on it, put ourselves to bed at around the same time and wake up at around the same time if we get the why of that.
Yeah, that's great, and I love that you specified that the consistency and number of hours and so on, because that makes a lot of clarity for a lot of people, including me a few years ago. I thought the more was better. I thought that I could make up for it. The classic things, like you said, is the recover the debt on the weekend, right? And during the week is okay, we're busy work, but I'm gonna work in the weekend and then I'm gonna be even. And I'm glad you specify that it does not work like that. But I think that now, compared to a few years ago, we have a few advantages when it comes to sleep. First of all, I think that there is a shift in society now. In sociology believes that, before, if you don't sleep, you are a hero, right? You didn't sleep to work. You are a hero. Here's your medal. Now, I guess everyone knows how important it is. That maybe they don't know the biology behind it, but everyone knows how important it is. And the other, I think, big and second shift is that you can now track things. You could do it before, but on a clinic. Now you can do that at home. And that's where I got a few questions for you regarding. First of all, how important is tracking, and which devices you recommend out there to help, with sleep and tracking?
Yeah, absolutely. So sleep and tracking, it's actually, so sleep is a skill. Our aim is to really help people optimize their sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. So with that commitment, one of the first things that we do have people do is get a sleep tracker if they're not already, tracking. And I think that one can be interesting because many people might be either hesitant to do that or what have you. But what's really, really important is that can help us to get a real baseline of where our sleep is at, where our health, some of the health metrics that are on there. And, when we say health metrics, just meaning some of these nocturnal metrics that can just give us some sort of indication around the quality or level of recovery throughout the course of the night. Yeah. I do, however, definitely warn people about giving too much credit to the sleep stages on the hand and wrist-based trackers. So the REM, deep, light sleep, those kind of classifications, because as of right now, the hand and wrist ones have not fared well as compared to a polysonogram, but they have a lot of other things that still that we can get a lot of information about the quality of our sleep. But those ones in particular have really been the equivalent of a coin toss for most of them. If they're getting on the head, those tend to be fare a bit better. However, the applicability of those, so the willingness for people to wear or not have missing data, so the Dream, the Muse, the Philips, different ones that are on the head, it's an extra step. It's a little weird looking. It's like a whole thing. So instead, if we start looking on the hand and wrist based ones, I can tell you that as of right now in June 2021, I have everyone at Sleep is a Skill wearing Oura Rings at the very least to start. And many of the people that I'm working with might have multiple trackers that they're layering in. So they might also have the Whoop for their activity and then get more sense of their strain and HRV and an element of the sleep portion. Biostrap being another popular one, and can layer in a few other metrics that those two aren't. Apple could be another one that some people are leaning into. You can also do things like the head-based ones that I was mentioning, the Dream, the Muse, Philips. And then there's some more peripheral ones that are starting to pop up, but those are some of the main players, just in the sleep-specific conversation. But either way, starting there, and I should also point out, I know a lot of people do Fitbit too, and they are starting to up-level some of their tech. So there's a lot of excitement in these wearable arenas, but those are some of the ones that we do for the sleep part itself.
Yeah, that's great. I personally use an Oura Ring, but I was curious about all the others, especially the Whoop and the what's the other band name?
Biostrap?
The Biostrap.
Yeah.
Do they do the same things? Those, in my mind, correct me if I'm wrong, for the business to consumer market, like then obviously you got Fitbit and Apple, but I think they're a little bit more behind. Those big three, is there one in particular that you prefer between Aura, Biostrap, and Whoop?
Good question. So Aura, I really like for their kind of stickiness, if you will, for their user interface, the ability to record your trends, the coaching platform from my side. So for sleep specifically, I like to at least start with Aura, but Biostrap, I also really like for sleep. It also pulls in blood oxygen levels, and we can also go a little bit more granularly with the data than some of them will allow for, because some of them kind of have a wall up between some of the amount of data that you can access. So Biostrap does a nice job of allowing us to see a bit more. They'll also pull a little bit of data throughout the course of the day too, to kind of give a comparison of your nocturnal readings and your daytime readings. And then they do also have an activity component. I would say, because a lot of these kind of excel in certain areas. So then I would say the Whoop, if you are more, so a lot of my athletes have the Whoop, and so they really like the strain component and the pushing them for their workouts and the measurement of their HRV, the super clarity element of they have a color coded system for when you wake up, like, are you recovered? It's in the red if you're really not recovered, yellow if you got to really take it easy, or, green if you're good to go. And so people kind of like some of that. And then, there are other trackers for other things, like Garmin does have a sleep tracking component on it. And so some of my runners really love that one, and they'll also check out some elements of the sleep. So there's definitely this kind of biohacker data friendly element here where people will, overlay a number of these. But for this conversation, I would say if you're just starting and saying, all right, I'm curious to improve my sleep, I definitely would have most people start with the Oura Ring. I wouldn't get that if more important to you is your activity, because it tracks it, but it's not like, it's not the function. But I could also make the argument on the other side that getting great sleep is going to improve your results with your activity too. So it kind of just depends on what your goals are. Yeah.
I personally started with the Oura Ring because I knew I was 7 hours in bed, but I will wake up feeling like crap. So I said, I need to see what's going on. In fact, when I started, I was 7 hours of light sleep. I personally gonna go with the Biostrap as well, because for me, metrics like, I know Oura Ring does those, but heart rate variability and other metrics like that are very, very important. And for me, I'm personally using the Oura Ring just at night, because if I grab stuff, like I go to the beach, I do rock climbing and stuff, like the ring is not ideal for that. The strap at least leaves my hands free. But
sure.
Yeah, but I think for anyone who is starting, just get a sort of tracking device, anything, but track it so you know what's going on. And people might be surprised. And once they get a tracking device, they might see, between the tracking devices, you may have some differences, but in the tracking itself, like if you just use the Oura Ring, for a few months, you might see some consistencies there as well. And people might see, for example, a lack of deep sleep or a lack of REM sleep or a lack of both. And that's what I want to talk with you today about. And please feel free to add any other metrics that you think are very important for sleep. But in my head, the two main ones are deep sleep and REM sleep. Am I right? Or am I missing something?
Great question. So a couple things. One, it'll be awesome as you navigate getting the Biostrap, because the more of these trackers, the more we start to, if we get too outcomes that concern around the inaccuracy of the sleep stages, because you might be optimizing for the readouts that are on the Oura Ring, but then you get the Whoop, you get the Biostrap, and they're like totally different numbers. And so So I've seen people really, no pun intended, like lose sleep over those readouts, and then they get other trackers and it's a whole other ball game depending. And it's not to say that there can't be some element to something to learn from just a panning out perspective and seeing some trends. But more what we have people lean into in particular is the HRV, the heart rate variability, because that's a metric of recovery, and a lot of the if we're talking about Oura Ring, the readiness indicators are ones that all tend to fare well as compared to some other readouts from kind of gold standards as far as the comparison, certainly with polysonogram and the sleep stages, but also just is the HRV fairly accurate? Is the heart rate? Is the body temperature? Is the respiratory rate? And those all seem to do quite well. So getting a sense of those can be a more worthwhile place to go. So if that answers that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh my gosh, for HRV, for those ones who don't know at home, I done an episode with Tim Gray where we talked just about HRV. It stands for heart rate variability, and it's personally one of my favorite metric of all time, just not for sleep, for anything. I can really tell when my Oura Ring records a low. So heart rate variability, you want a high, like you want a high average, you don't want a low one. When it's low, I really can tell the difference in my day. There I can see consistency between the heart rate variability being low and having a bad day. I was going to say something else. And having a heart rate variability that is high, and I can tell the difference in my mood, in my recovery. Is high heart rate variability, it seems that your body is recovering quite well. Do you know much about heart rate variability? I know this is not where we agreed, but do you know much about heart rate variability? And I won't say too much on it, but do you have some tips on people who struggle in increasing heart rate variability, how to get that higher?
Yes. So what's really amazing about heart rate variability is that one, sleep certainly is going to be a big element of improving that number and that trend over time. So on a lot of these trackers, they're measuring specifically nocturnal heart rate variability. So that's your nighttime HRV, which is going to be distinct from your daytime HRV. So I do have people wearing other trackers for the daytime HRV. So we have a lot of people wearing the Lief, spelled Lief, short for Get Relief. No affiliation, just it's one of the things that we also look to, because that can give us a sense of stress during the course of the day and how we respond to that and lowering that. So one example of improving HRV from that realm is actually the breath. So leaning in. So what that tracker will do is that it will buzz you. So you wear it, basically right at your heart. And when your HRV is dipping and your heart rate is going up, then you will get buzzed. And so you'll shift your breathing accordingly. So what's really cool about that is you can start to train yourself that you yourself have the ability to lower your heart rate, raise your HRV, and through just the shifting of how you're posturing, how you're holding yourself. You'll also see how many little things can shift the quality of, or shift the readout of your HRV. So things like standing are going to make your HRV lower, because it's just taking more, it's whatever load your body is under and its ability to respond quickly. So if you're eating and you're digesting, then your HRV is going to be lower. If you're talking, your HRV is going to be lower. There's a lot of noise throughout the course of the day, which is why nocturnal HRV can be particularly interesting, because there's less noise. You're presumably doing less while you're laying in bed, although there's a lot of activity happening while you're sleeping in your brain. So during that time, just some easy breezy things. And I see this time and time again, because I'm just looking at people's stats all day long. And so I can immediately know almost always if they ate late, if they drank, if they've been having a strain of stress, if they have it also when they're having a lot of ups and downs over the course of time, with their sleep. then we'll see less. We'll see more dips in their sleep because of that lack of consistency and lack of quality sleep recovery. Heat, if it's hot in their space, that can have it go up. If they're dehydrated, that can have it go down. So I should clarify, but if it's hot, it's going down.
Yeah.
And if it's cool, so like a lot of clients end up getting things like, the Oura or Eat mattress, Bright beds, all these different things that will be cooling or have access to that. Then that can be an element that can help lower or improve their HRV, lower heart rate and improve HRV. So there's a number of things. And then also the more esoteric one, I just had a doctor on the podcast recently who referred to it as your joy score, which I thought was interesting, because this idea that stress is going to come into your readouts. So I'll have some clients that come my way and are really chronically anxious or stressed, and they will have very, relatively low HRV readouts, and lots of dips from even their own baseline. So that's one of those more challenging to kind of, at least you can point to, oh yeah, I drank, oh yeah, I did this, but it's just being kind of, low mood, stressed, all of those sort of things, how that comes out is a really interesting fact as well.
No, that's great. And I know at some point I'm just going to have to do one episode where it's just one question, HRV, 1 hour talking about HRV, because I know it's so wide. One thing that I'm going to ask you at the end of this episode, and I'm sure you have stuff like that, I want to put a link in the show notes with all the type of devices that you recommend and so on, because I know there is so much out there. You already mentioned it. I'm very interested to the Lief device. HRV training is something that I certainly do recommend. I haven't done it. It's something that is definitely on my list. I learned about it from Tim Ferriss in one of his books, but at the time I think they were just those huge devices. I don't know how the Lief looks, but I think 10 years past, I think is more manageable, and it must be something that you can carry around, I hope.
It's maybe the size of like a credit card or something.
Okay.
And I would say it's still not the most user-friendly, but because you do have to wear like these little medical pads, almost like stickers, right? And you do have to put it onto your body. And the one positive thing about that is it's certainly one of the most accurate on the market right now, because it's right directly over your heart. And then you are it's acting almost like a continuous glucose monitor, but for your HRV. So it's just nonstop pulling your information. And then that's when you get that buzzing to shift your state in the moment versus downstream, when now you're just like, I don't know why I'm cranky or upset or whatever. It's you've just been now in that state for an extended period of time. The goal with this is to kind of catch it in the moment before it gets downhill there.
Yeah, that's great. And it's amazing. Like for some people might be working to the office every morning and they might see a shift in heart rate variability. That means you hate your job and your job is like making you stressed. But there are so many, right?
Yes, that's such a good point, because actually I've had to kind of counsel some people once they have gotten the Lief, because it does take a lot of extrapolating or kind of looking at the whole story, because I have literally had some people say like, oh, I guess I can't have so many Zoom calls. They're stressing me out. I'm always getting buzzed during them. I guess I must not like this person because I'm getting buzzed during it. I must be stressed with them. Not realizing that, just like I was saying, just talking, the act of talking is taxing on the body. You're breathing differently. Your posture is different. If you're standing up, that's going to be taxing. I mean, all of those different variables. If you just ate something, it's the digestion process takes a lot on the body. So it really has you, one, begin to have more reverence for all that your body does throughout the course of the day. Two, hopefully like pulling apart all of those other variables before we just start making up a lot of meaning that can, maybe not be empowering to us. Yeah.
So this is great. I want to just translate once more for people at home, because this is very great and very amazing. Guys, if you get a device like this, you can basically, you have a device that tells you what is actually stressing you, and stress can accumulate to your body, and you can train on how to respond to those stressor. And if you put those, like, there might be stressors that you don't even realize that are stressors, right? There can be like traffic, there can be a lot of little things like you mentioned. And I think this is so powerful if you work on, first of all, identifying which are your stresses, and then working out on how you react on that. You can just become a totally different person. This is why I love heart rate variability, and this is why I think it's one of the, to be honest, one of my top biohacks, or things to improve. It's great. But coming back to sleep, okay, I really have a lot of questions about so 3 things in particular, right? So deep sleep. Those are my 3 main categories that I'm gonna ask you: deep sleep, REM sleep, and also the actual sleep cycle. And for sleep cycle, I mean, you can have 2 hours REM sleep, 2 hours deep sleep, but then you have just the REM sleep at the end, the deep sleep at the beginning, compared to having just 30 minutes, like the actual cycle, on and off. So those are the 3 areas that I want to ask you. So let's go one at a time. REM sleep, what it is, why is it important, and then I'm going to ask you any sort of, this interests me particularly. So that's why, I'm just selfish when I record podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. So REM sleep, so rapid eye movement, that is we're cycling into that on the second half of our night, as you mentioned. So going into the early morning hours for most of us, unless you're a shift worker, but certainly the second half of your night. And what's going on there is some of that dream-like, although there are some other parts of our sleep that we might be having some elements of dreams, but this dream-like dream period, we are paralyzed so that we can't act out some of those dreams. And during that process, we're really starting to, one of the benefits seems to be, or the theory is, that we're making meaning out of the things that we've been kind of going throughout the course of the day, or things that have been in our kind of occupying space in our brain. So we're really sorting through those, deciding what to keep, what to throw out, kind of reasoning elements, spatial reasoning elements. There's a number of things that we're kind of sorting through in REM. And so it's also been referred to as kind of our inward or internal therapist, if you will. So to be able to really handle and process things so that we can also help to shift some of the coupling of emotion over certain things, and kind of keep level-headedness around what's happening in our life. REM really can help support us with that. Whereas if we are consistently not getting sufficient REM, then we can have more challenges with things just might occur as more challenging. We might be more overwhelmed in certain things. That element of kind of mental health is really supported there, is one of those things that we benefit from during sleep. And since it is in that second half of the night, and because the body does like to keep the architecture of sleep on time, if you will, then if you're finding that you're often waking up in that second half, or just not even waking up and going back to sleep, but also waking up and then being up, so then you're cutting off that second half and cutting into that REM, then that can certainly be challenging, because then now we haven't had the benefit of that sort of internal therapist. Now we're expected to go out about our day, and often, not always, but there can be a tendency, if we are having a lot of wake ups, then we might already be dealing with something that might be a stressor under kind of a particular load of stress, and then it can be a bit of a snowball effect, because now we're not kind of set up powerfully to take on the things that we got to handle. So it just can be a challenging period. Also, if we're not just being woken up, but if we're someone that says kind of like that old mentality, as you were speaking to, of like the, rise and grind, and like, if you really want it, you're going to go to bed late, wake up early, all of that, then that can be cutting into that wake up time. And then I have just a number of clients who even their environment might be one of the things at the source of that. So lights coming into their room, it's getting warmer in their room in the early morning. It's all of these sort of things that might be impeding the quality of their sleep during those morning hours. And it might not be egregious enough for them to totally take the steps to, absolutely do all the things that we probably know to do, black out the room, make it cool, make it cold, but it's just enough that they're not feeling great, and then that can stack. And there can be a number of other reasons that you might be, either waking up or having poor sleep, particularly in that second half of the night, which we can go into if you like. But those are some of the reasons, one, why it's important, and two, what we can see often when people are having insufficient total REM sleep.
Interesting. So you're saying that if people lack on REM sleep, like the goal, let's say, if we can summarize this in just one advice, the goal would be trying to, actually finishing your sleep, like get your 7 hours, get your 8 hours, and without having the waking up to go to pee, or for several reasons. And one of the reasons to wake up is that, or just to get out, to not getting into the REM sleep, like you said, is temperature. So that can directly affect REM sleep as well.
So you're often the body temperature is starting to slowly pick up. So in a deep sleep, we're at, some of our lowest body temps throughout the course of our sleep. Into the early morning hours, the temperature, our body temperature, and of course the ambient temperature, if you have connection to the elements in your space, light tends to come up and be a very clear one that can often wake us up, or kind of have micro wake ups. And so those should just be some environmental reasons. And yet there's a number of other reasons for wake ups that we didn't plan for. There are the people that, like we said, that might be planning for, I'm going to set the alarm. I'm kind of not planning my day in a way that works. And so then they're going to bed late and still having to get up early. That can obviously be one of those reasons. But there's a number of other things that we, if you want to get into around wake ups. But the other important thing about that consistency is that consistency is going to help kind of normalize the quality of the sleep stages that we're getting night after night after night. And then that can be just one of those foundational places that we want to start before people start getting into, I'm going to take all these supplements and all these things, which, they can have a time and a place, of course, and can be very important depending on where you're at. But if we don't have some of these behavioral things ironed out, just that are so basic and yet often hard to adhere to, once we get that kind of workability, then often the balancing can improve of that. But also just overall health and quality of health and a foundation of health is going to show up into your sleep results.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess that's why I really recommend people having a sleep coach, because, as people can already tell, there are so many things, so many variables and so on. And it changes so much from person to person based on environment, biology, physiological, external factor, and so on. So I just want to highlight that once more, that is very important, having a sleep coach. Okay, so environment can be one of those, and some of them you mentioned them, and then of course you said something that is right, is that cover your basics first, and that is valid not just for sleep, for everything else, and then get into the more hard stuff like supplements and so on. That can have a place. Talking about supplements, I always said these things about melatonin. Of course, you cannot talk about melatonin. I've never taken anything like that, and I'm still now at present, I am a little bit confused about melatonin. For those who don't know, it's a hormone. It's supposed to be low in the morning, high at night. It kind of goes opposite to cortisol. When cortisol is high in the morning, melatonin should be low, and vice versa. Correct me if I'm wrong. And melatonin can not just help sleep, is also a powerful antioxidant, and there's another world around melatonin. The reason why I haven't taken melatonin so far is for two reasons. First of all is, that goes, I'm perfectly aligned to what you said, is cover the basics first before jumping, to any type of other thing, supplements and so on. The second reason is because melatonin, by being a hormone, my main concern was, I think people need to be careful, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, when they take melatonin, because if it's a hormone, and my knowledge about hormone is that if you take in external hormones, then your body can kind of get used to it, taking it externally, and you kind of minimize or slow down your internal production. Is that the case for melatonin as well?
Yeah, great points. So about melatonin, you really nailed it. There's two kind of camps on this, two schools of thought. I tend to hover in the thinking similar to you, that the concern around leaning into an external source like that for a hormone. There are certain other state or countries that will have to have prescriptions and what have you. Over here in the US, you do not need to have a prescription to get melatonin, and it's in just every other, like kids kind of cold and flu bottles and all these things. It's very present here, and in certain other countries, and then in not so much in other countries. So some countries will have a reverence for it, and over here we're just very seemingly casual about it. So I tend to agree with what you're sharing. There's a concern that could impede our body's ability to produce that on our own. Also, there's another camp that talks about really high dose, like incredibly high dose melatonin, and leaning into that, and benefits the thinking of the antioxidant element that you're leaning into, and then as well as improved sleep qualities of thinking. But I would say a very present concern is the disruption of the hormone production ourselves, but also the timing and depending on if you get extended release or if it's just at the start, and how this often is not really mimicking in alignment with what our sleep or melatonin production would look like. And then often people taking too much, or from at least our understanding, looking like too much and then having an effect into the morning as well. So those are just some of the reasons, but also then even from the psychological component, being dependent on something external. Now, there can be times when people, there might be reasons. So say like if you're dealing with jet lag and you're looking to adjust certain elements, some people will lean into it for elderly age groups that are really struggling with their sleep. Sometimes for some groups like autism and other areas that could be an area to lean into, or if there's a sleep pathology that you're dealing with. So those could be some other conversations, but for the healthy adult, I definitely think being wary of that can be wise.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And the reason why I asked that is because obviously there are a lot of, number of things that you already mentioned that are, baseline to get a good sleep. Watch your lighting, your room temperature, don't eat too late. I personally found that when you eat late, my sleep, just that single factor, right? My sleep is off. And if I eat early, I can do everything wrong, but my sleep is still kind of optimal. But for those people who are already on, talking about the snowball effect, let's say they are already in the snowball effect, like the ball is so big and they are, in this loop now, and they're trying to do all the right things, regulating, dark light, blue blocking glasses, regulated temperature and so on. And despite that, they still struggle. And I say because I have a couple of friends in these situations, they still struggle with sleep. My belief is that it's a little bit too late just for the baselines to cover it. Is that, what would you do in this case when the baselines are not enough just because they reached almost like a point of no return because too stressed in life and so on?
Yeah. So because sleep is so nuanced, like I had one client that referred to it as sleep, what did she call it? Forensics, I think. Was it sleepology? That was what she called it, sleepology. Forensic sleepology, that's what she said. And the reason I say that is that often you have to ask a lot of questions, get in deeper on what are, because, it can be easy to say, oh, well, you got to get lavender or just some basic thing, right?
Yeah.
And yet if lavender is not going to save someone if you have sleep apnea, if you have consistently, or if you're getting insufficient sleep staging, there's a number of these sort of things. So one, getting really connected to what's happening for the individual person, because they might, to your point, be doing all the right things, but there's an obstruction in their breathing, that there's their sleep environment, there's mold in the space, that the air quality stinks, that it's, just some elements that are surprising, some baseline health elements that might be present, that they're, for them leaning into a ton of caffeine, so there's a lot of things that we want to peel back the layers on. But back to what you said about kind of a lot of the things being handled, then we want to really lean into tracking, because with that tracking, we can start to, if you go deeper and know what you're looking at for some of these readouts, then you can often see where the missing is for that individual person. So say, for instance, they're nailing the bedtime, they're nailing the wake time, but they keep waking up and their HRV is low. Then we can start to see, okay, so they're so strategizing on getting all these things right for their sleep, and they're getting outside, they're getting their morning light, they're getting their blue blockers, they're doing all the things, but they seem to be cued into kind of a stress response state, in that sympathetic state. And then that's one of the elements that's playing into those wake ups, and the body's sort of inability to calm that nervous system. So with something like that, for that sort of person, then we'd need to lean into, I love how Andrew Huberman's sort of coining it, the non-sleep deep rest protocols. So going under things that can really calm the nervous system, like yoga nidra, hypnosis, but in certain other practices, like we were speaking to with the Lief, and how to step into that resonance breathing and different things. So that would be for one group. But there can also be some elements of kind of chronic stressors that might be present, that people might become just resigned to. So one of the frameworks we have is called a sleep tripod. So to get great sleep, you have to have workability between all three legs of that tripod: psychology, physiology, and environment. So if one of those elements are sort of out of alignment, then there can be disruptions in your sleep. So, if your magnesium levels are really, really low, if your vitamin D is really low, if your B vitamins are off, if your thyroid's off, iron levels, all of these sort of things, then it's likely we'll see some, some areas of your sleep to improve. Same with sleep, the psychology aspect of things. So if you chronically have some areas that you're either resigned to, that you're just stuck with, and that's the way they are, or you hate your job or whatever, often those things will come out in your sleep in some way, shape, or form. So that can be another element for us to get up under. And then there could even be some of those environmental elements lurking. So that's why we really say that sleep is a skill, because it's not so cut and dry. It's not like, and if it was, probably wouldn't be a skill. I mean, there's so many layers that go into this. It's not really that kind of formula based element. There's so much to peel back. So I think that's, a great call out of, what first step, because ultimately you want to have a framework by which you're approaching, and then have, getting ourselves educated about the things that can make a difference, and then testing those things so that we're, not just guessing, but we're seeing some of the readouts ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. And again, guys, you can see there is so much behind it, right? There is environment, toxins, your blood markers, behavior, external stressor, room temperature. There are so many things that you can do. So I always think about it this way: if you hack your sleep, you just hack everything else. Like your mood, you're more productive the day after. I was one of those people. 4 hours sleep a night is fine. I'm now doing 8 hours when I'm a good boy. But when I improving my sleep has brought my business to 6 figures in 6 months by having, how many hours? 4 hours a night more is a lot of hours through the years, right? And that's because you're just a better version of yourself. So if you have to do an investment, I think sleep is the basic, because it covers all the biohacks. Every biohacker will tell you, every doctor, everyone will tell you, if you need to stick to one thing, is sleep. And then everything else, the gym, because it carries on everything else. The gym, your mood, your appearance, your hair, everything. So that is the absolute base. I still have a lot of questions for you, but we're running out of time, and I know you have a call after. What I'll do is I will link a lot of I will ask you for all sort of links here on the show notes. To summarize, would you like to do like a small, like a literally 1-2 minute summary of people who are starting to? So from tomorrow, they want to do all the right things about sleep. From the morning to the night, would you like saying what is the typical day, including trackers and markers and toxins and so on, of a person who want to really optimize their sleep? Just go all in 2 minutes.
It depends on the person, their goals, where they are located, where their health's at, so a number of things, but just I can certainly share some of the things that I do. I wake up at around the same time each day. I throw back the curtain shades to get, some light in, then really pretty immediately go outside. I grab some water with electrolytes and go outside and get that light in between, in certainly my eyes, but also on my skin. And so resetting of that master clock. Aiming to do that on the fairly early side of the day. Then we'll usually work out right after that, still in alignment with that kind of circadian cue of workouts, cueing, a raise, an understanding that that's sort of in alignment with that early morning spike of cortisol. So acting in alignment with that. Then we'll usually have, I have food shortly thereafter. I know a lot of people, and certainly I used to do this, would be to skip breakfast. However, if you lean into something like circadian rhythm, intermittent fasting, your aim is to eat largely between sunrise and sunset. Or also early time restricted feeding, where you're stopping, you're kind of flipping, the traditional IF where you're skipping breakfast. Instead, you're almost kind of skipping dinner, but you're more making it like a dinner, like a lunch dinner. So I tend to lean into more of that. And then also, if you're going to have a cheat day, aiming to have that earlier on in the day, to not impact your sleep by having some big, arduous, crazy meal to have to digest. You can play with something like that. Then aiming to get as much light as possible during my workday. I also turn up the temperature in the space so that the ambient temperature has enough of that variability, that variance between nighttime and daytime. So aiming to get that body temperature up. Then taking on a lot of cognitive tasks. So also taking on any of those things that might be stressors that could potentially be, something that you might ruminate about in the while you're in bed. Instead, getting those done during the course of the day is the goal. Then really time blocking and working until I can be off, at the end of the day. And then really with that being off, training ourselves to then not go too much into, the elements that you could as an entrepreneur, or, if you have another business or other things, or if you're working with a business and there might be some things for you to get done, training ourselves to truly be off. Then within the nighttime, we're getting as much dim light as possible, so moving our space into, for most people, that would be incredibly dim / pretty dark in the evening, blue blockers if I'm gonna watch something, but also not resting on our laurels that blue blockers are gonna save the day if you have a lot of crazy faux light in your environment. And then aiming to shift the type of things that I am engaging with in the evening to really kind of down regulate any stressors that I might be experiencing. Of course, the Lief, like we mentioned, can also point out things that you might be stressing about, even shows you might be watching or whatever. It will definitely sniff out what's not aligning with that goal of kind of relaxing or connecting with others, or, but just certainly distinct from work. Shifting into, if you're going to talk about supplements, you're aiming to have gotten that vitamin D in the daytime hours, but of course, where you might be geographically, you might be impacted by that. So with that, you can lean into things like vitamin D, K2, and the difference that can make for your sleep. And then in the evening, these are just some general things, because of course, different people have different stuff, but this is often applies for a lot of people, moving into things like magnesium in the evening, and then particularly, glycinate or threonate, depending on, what serves you most, but moving into those things. And then if you are particularly stressed, things like L-theanine, Ashwagandha, some of these other things to help support kind of just that goal of relaxing. And then you've also done some of those kind of breath work training protocols throughout the course of the day. So then the goal is to kind of downshift any of those stressors at will when you get up close to bed. And then for me, I do a nightly gratitude email, and I've done it for 2,000. I think I just hit like 2,300 or something days in a row. So it's every single day, send that out to friends and family and say like what I'm grateful for. And, just sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's yay, whatever. It's just, what you're grateful for, setting you up for a nice kind of primed mind to go into getting solid sleep. When I go, and a little bit before going to bed, I've turned down the AC, so that's even cooler in the space. The Oura goes on automatically. We got lots of red lights going on, different things of that nature. We might have thrown in a sauna earlier on, depending, but with enough time to kind of cool down the body. And then the aim is to set up life in a way that then there's not too many crazy stressors by the time we're going to sleep. So that we can go to sleep and stay asleep. And of course, just managing certain things like when you're drinking water so that you're not impeding your sleep-wake cycle and things of that nature, but also being hydrated, getting fine-tuned little things like that. But over time, when it's so consistent, then that takes out a lot of the work. So you're not having to try so hard to fall asleep.
That was more than 2.5 minutes, Mollie.
Yes, right? A lot of things.
But I had to say,
and that's not even all of them, but it gives us an idea.
That gives an idea. So it might seem a lot for people, but guys, it's just literally shifting a 45 minutes YouTube mindless watching to all those things together. It might seem a lot, but it's just shifting bad habits to good habit. It's not a lot at all. And I know a lot of the things that you mentioned are not free, but 90% of the things that you mentioned are free, and it can really make the difference. Alrighty, I'm going to wrap it up now because I really need to be mindful of your time, but I know a lot of people would want to know more, and they probably have realized that there is so much more to know, and how they can find out more about you, how can they reach you out?
Great question. Yeah, so sleepisaskill.com acts as the bucket for sort of all of the things. So if you go there, you can take a sleep assessment. It will get you automatically an email back that's tailored to what you're dealing with your sleep. That will also sign you up for a weekly newsletter every Monday that goes out. And that also includes our weekly podcast. And in alignment with that, you can, if you are, so one, our goal and commitment is that either way, those resources can get you free information on improving your sleep. And if you're still really struggling and need more support, then we do have 90-day packages of one-on-ones or small group cohorts so that you can get more hands-on kind of guidance and help with your sleep.
That's great. And of course, all the links is going to be in the show notes. Mollie, I thank you very much for your time. There's so much new stuff that I learned, and so much information for sure for the people who are listening. Thank you so much. It's been great, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Hey there. Thanks for listening. Before we conclude, I'd like you to remind you something very, very important. This episode, as well as these podcasts in general, is for general informational purposes only, and does not constitute medical advice. Listeners should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have. Please, if you have any medical condition, consult your physician first. Disclaimer given, I would love for you to subscribe to this podcast and to leave me a review. That will help me a lot. We're just starting out. We have already a lot of great interviews down the line, which you don't want to miss. So hit the subscribe button so you will get notification for the next exciting episode. I'll see you next time.
Hey there! If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. In fact, I'm recording this from your phone right now. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify,
Apple Podcast, and many other platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So go ahead, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.